The Supreme Court just declared that telling a vulnerable teenager their identity is a disease that can be cured might be protected speech under the Constitution. Even though every major medical organization in America has condemned this practice as dangerous and debunked, the First Amendment has become a shield for something science calls harmful, and this ruling could affect thousands of young lives. Welcome to Court Decoded. Today we examine a Supreme Court decision that puts free speech rights in direct conflict with the safety of LGBTQ+ youth, and the science that says conversion therapy causes real harm. Conversion therapy refers to any practice that attempts to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. These interventions range from talk therapy sessions designed to alter attraction patterns to more extreme historical methods including electroshock treatment and institutionalization. The practice emerged in the 20th century when homosexuality was classified as a mental disorder. Practitioners claimed they could cure what they considered a psychological illness. But as scientific understanding evolved, the medical community reached a different conclusion. The American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, and virtually every mainstream health organization now agree sexual orientation and gender identity cannot be changed through therapy. More critically, attempts to do so cause documented harm, including depression, anxiety, and significantly elevated rates of suicide attempts among those subjected to these practices, particularly adolescents. As evidence of harm accumulated, states began taking action. California became the first state to ban conversion therapy for minors in 2012. New Jersey followed the next year under Republican Governor Chris Christie, who called the practice something that could not be part of a licensed professional's practice. Over the following decade, more than 20 states and numerous municipalities enacted similar prohibitions. The bans typically targeted licensed mental health professionals, prohibiting them from practicing conversion therapy on minors while leaving religious counseling and adult therapy unregulated. Proponents argued these laws protected vulnerable children from a practice with no proven benefits and documented harms. But opponents saw something different: government intrusion into the therapeutic relationship and a violation of both professional and client speech rights. The stage was set for a constitutional showdown. The legal challenges to conversion therapy bans centered on one fundamental question: is therapy speech? Traditional First Amendment analysis protects citizens from government restrictions on expression, but courts have long recognized that the government can regulate professional conduct, including what doctors say to patients. A surgeon cannot lie about the risks of an operation. A lawyer cannot advise a client to commit perjury. The question became whether conversion therapy fell into the category of regulable professional conduct or protected expression of ideas. Challengers argued that therapy consists entirely of words, conversations between counselor and client. Regulating what a therapist can say, they contended, is regulating speech itself. They invoked the specter of government-approved viewpoints, warning that if states could ban one therapeutic approach, they could ban any perspective they deemed incorrect. The First Amendment argument proved powerful. Attorneys challenging the bans pointed to a series of Supreme Court precedents suggesting that content-based speech restrictions receive the highest level of judicial scrutiny. They argued conversion therapy bans were precisely that: the government choosing which therapeutic messages were acceptable and which were forbidden. Under this framework, even speech that many consider harmful or worthless receives protection. The Supreme Court has protected violent video games, offensive protests at military funerals, and false statements about military honors. The question was whether speech that occurs in a professional therapy setting deserves similar protection. Lower courts had split on the issue. The Ninth Circuit upheld California's ban, finding it regulated conduct rather than speech. But other circuits expressed concern about the implications of allowing states to dictate the content of therapeutic conversations. While the legal battle unfolded in courtrooms, medical organizations amplified their warnings. The Trevor Project, the nation's largest suicide prevention organization for LGBTQ+ youth, released data showing that young people who underwent conversion therapy were more than twice as likely to attempt suicide. The American Academy of Pediatrics called the practice harmful and ineffective. Former practitioners came forward to denounce their past work, describing the psychological damage they had witnessed and inflicted. Some states presented evidence of teenagers experiencing severe depression, self-harm, and lasting trauma following conversion therapy. The medical consensus was unequivocal. These practices violate the fundamental principle of medicine to first do no harm. But the legal system operates on different principles than the medical system, and scientific consensus does not automatically translate into constitutional permissibility of regulation. When the Supreme Court took up the issue, observers knew a landmark decision was coming. The court's majority sided with the challengers, finding that conversion therapy bans implicated core First Amendment concerns. The ruling emphasized that the government cannot suppress speech simply because it disagrees with the message or believes the speech is harmful. The majority acknowledged the scientific consensus against conversion therapy, but concluded that the proper remedy for speech the state considers dangerous is counter-speech, not suppression. Justice writing for the majority noted that allowing states to ban therapeutic speech based on professional consensus would create a slippery slope. Today, conversion therapy. Tomorrow, any treatment approach that falls out of favor. The decision did not require states to endorse conversion therapy, but it prevented them from prohibiting licensed professionals from engaging in these conversations. The dissenting justices offered a sharply different vision. They argued the majority had elevated abstract speech principles over concrete harm to children. Professional speech, they contended, has always been subject to regulation in ways ordinary speech is not. Doctors cannot prescribe medications known to be dangerous simply because they believe in them. Therapists should not be able to practice treatments proven to cause psychological harm. The dissent warned the ruling would invalidate not just conversion therapy bans, but potentially any regulation of professional speech, undermining decades of consumer protection law. They described case after case of young people harmed by these practices, arguing the Constitution was never meant to prevent states from protecting vulnerable children from demonstrable psychological damage. For advocacy organizations like the Trevor Project, the ruling represented a devastating setback in efforts to protect LGBTQ+ youth. The ruling immediately impacted conversion therapy bans across the country. States with existing prohibitions faced challenges to their enforcement. New legislative efforts to protect minors had to navigate a more restrictive constitutional landscape. Advocacy organizations shifted strategies, focusing on public education campaigns rather than legal prohibition. Some called for federal legislation, though any such law would face the same constitutional hurdles. Others pushed for professional licensing boards to take action, revoking credentials from practitioners who engage in discredited practices. The medical community doubled down on its opposition, with major organizations urging members to refuse to practice conversion therapy regardless of legal permissibility. The debate had shifted from whether conversion therapy is harmful, the science on that remains clear, to whether the Constitution permits the government to stop it. The Supreme Court ruled that state bans on conversion therapy for minors violate the First Amendment by impermissibly restricting professional speech. The decision treats therapeutic conversations as protected expression that the government cannot suppress based on disagreement with the message. While the medical community unanimously condemns conversion therapy as harmful and ineffective, the court concluded that constitutional speech protections prevent states from banning the practice when conducted by licensed professionals. The ruling does not endorse conversion therapy, but prevents its prohibition, leaving LGBTQ+ youth advocates searching for alternative strategies to protect vulnerable young people. The legal lesson here is profound. The First Amendment protects speech the majority finds abhorrent, and proving something causes harm is not sufficient to justify government suppression when that harm comes through words rather than actions. If this case raised questions about where free speech ends and protection begins, hit subscribe for more legal analysis. Cases like this shape the boundaries of constitutional rights for generations.